Break out those timelines and let your knowledge shine. It's been a week, so let's see what you learned. Eden Hope Academy.
Hello, welcome back to Eden Hope Academy. Are you ready for your timeline cards? I am so glad. So get out your timeline cards and your book. You need your book because we're going to do green for North America. When we talk about Lord Nelson, we're going to do Northern Europe right here. And then when we talk about the U.S. government bars the importation of slaves, we're going to do orange right here. So you need 3 colors this week: orange, blue, and green. Our first card is the Louisiana Purchase. And so look right here in your book. See this big dark green place? That is the area that France owned. And remember our French history. We had Louis XV, who was at the French and Indian War. Then Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette were the last monarchs of France, and it was taken over partially because of the Age of Enlightenment and the New Thinking. And the people who took it over were part of the Directory. Remember that? We talked about that last week. And 3 members of the Directory tried to bribe, do you remember? Yeah, they tried to bribe John Adams. And then the Directory was taken over basically by Napoleon Bonaparte, who became the dictator of France for many years. And Napoleon Bonaparte started quite a few wars in France, or with France, in other countries, mainly with Spain against England. And then he even went all the way to Russia at one point. He wanted to make France huge. But he had this, we're going to go down when we talk about just 4 years later, with these wars that he started, he needed money. And so Thomas Jefferson at that same time just happened to be looking at that Louisiana territory and thinking, I could take a sliver of that, and that would really be nice for this new country, since he was the 3rd president. And so he decided to offer $10 million for a sliver of this green area, just a little bit right down there. And Napoleon instead said that he would sell Thomas Jefferson the whole property for $15 million. So a huge amount more for just a little bit more price. And so this was a great deal for Thomas Jefferson, and he quickly convinced Congress to do it, and they purchased the Louisiana property from Napoleon Bonaparte, who was leading France at the time. And the first thing that Thomas Jefferson did was he asked his friend Meriwether Lewis to start an expedition team because they were hoping to find a direct route to the Pacific Ocean. So guess what that means? That means we're on week 11, card 2. So get out your card 2 for week 11, and we're talking about Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And Meriwether Lewis was only 28 years old in 1804 when he set off on this journey. And his friend Thomas Jefferson trusted that he could do this, he could find this route, and that he could also tell the Native Americans who had always lived on the property that it was no longer their property, it was no longer Spanish property who said it was theirs next, it was no longer French property who claimed it from the Spaniards. It was now property of the United States. And so as they went on this journey, remember they met with Sacagawea, and they had many people helping them on the journey, and they gave tokens to the chiefs of the different tribes, and they tried to explain to them that the land belonged to them. And they didn't get a whole bunch of resistance, and the reason is probably because the chiefs and the Indians, the Native Americans, truly thought that the land was like air, that everyone owned it, that no one could own the land, so they didn't really understand what Lewis and Clark were saying. And they probably wouldn't have been as receptive to them coming if they had understood. So there's so much about Lewis and Clark that you can get from the videos, and the videos are fascinating because I see each of you as a Lewis and Clark-like explorer. I see William and Jack from the Reston campus up in trees and playing in streams, and I see Noah from the San Antonio campus climbing trees and doing all kinds of stuff. And I've seen a lot of pictures of you guys being Lewis and Clark like people. And you are brave and strong. You love exploring. So I want you to watch those videos because I think you'll really enjoy them. But keep in mind that Lewis and Clark brought back plant samples and mineral samples, and they brought back pictures with them, great drawings like you're going to do in art, and they use compasses like you're going to use in science today. So that's your second card. Your third card, week number 11, card number 3, is Lord Nelson and the Battle of Trafalgar in 1807. And remember who I talked about, who was in charge of France at this time? That was Napoleon. And Napoleon started a whole bunch of conflicts. And so this was the third of a series of conflicts that Napoleon had started, and he teamed up with Spain against England. And the English had 27 ships, and the British, or the Spanish and the French outnumbered them by I think 33 or 35 ships, several more ships. And they had a battle, and the British lost no ships, and the French and the Spanish lost 22 of their ships. And so it was a decisive victory for Great Britain. Unfortunately, Lord Nelson was shot during this time, and he later died from his injuries, but he was so well respected that the French admiral who was in charge of that battle actually attended his funeral. And so what's important about this battle is it shows the English naval supremacy that's starting. They're really becoming a huge navy, a huge military force, and we're going to see them colonize a lot of Africa, a lot of Southeast Asia soon from now, and we'll be talking about that soon. But this was one of those battles that showed that England really was supreme with navy and their battles, and it also showed that Napoleon was just fighting and fighting and fighting during this time. So our last card is actually a scholar card, which means that the little guys don't have to do these, but our bigger guys should. And what I wanted to mention about that was in 1808, Congress passed a law that said no more Africans could be imported to the United States to be enslaved. And what I thought was interesting about that was that you had quite a few people who did not want our Constitution to not include people of African descent. They wanted everyone to have the same rights. And they fought for that very hard, and in the end, that didn't happen. Slavery continued in our country after the Constitution was passed. After we became our own nation, we still had slavery. And a lot of people knew that that was wrong. And so one of the things that they did was they started passing these types of laws to make it more and more difficult to enslave other people. And I think it's so important that we realize that, because when we know that the government is doing something wrong and it looks insurmountable to us, we need to keep trying to do what we know is right and what we know is God's will. And so this was one small victory in that. So that's the end of our cards this week. I'm so glad you joined us. I love the fact that you're at Eden Hope Academy. I think that you are a terrific kid. And I look forward to seeing you next week. See you later.
Break out those tired lines and let your knowledge shine. It's been a week, so let's see what you learn. Eden Hope Academy.